the people that are showing the footage and doing the broadcasting think that the more they try to support the national anthem protests and the purveyors of its agenda, that people will be convinced, but they're not. And there's a number of very good reasons why. I think there's more reasons why than I can get into in the amount of time I have today. And I've already gone through it a few times. And I've spent the majority of today talking mostly about other topics, not the protests. But when you have a group of people that are basically going out onto a field in order to compete and show that they have the desire to win, and one side inevitably comes up short and loses because there are two sides, and of course people don't like a tie, then people get displeased. Now add to that dimension the fact that you now have people that are going out in the field and acting in a very self-important and um, just rhetorical and patronizing way, telling the audience, well, we're not just here to compete and perform on on the athletic field. Excuse me. We're also here to tell you a certain part of our agenda and what we think about society. Well, that's all well and good if your team wins, but if your team doesn't win and you come home from the stadium, or um, you switch channels, and the last image you saw was your team leaving the field, hugging the other team's players as if you're buddies. Um, I think people understand that that's the way it goes, but they still don't like it. They don't like that they were just treated to a few hours of you possibly sucking it up on the field, not even giving your best effort, and then at the end it looks like a charade. It doesn't even in pro wrestling. It doesn't happen as much. You never see in pro wrestling, which is obviously fake. You still don't see in the arena of play the wrestlers hamming it up and high fiving and whatever if they were opponents. It's all in the perception. It's all in how people feel when they view the product. So yes, it's a very superficial issue. Why some of these fans don't like it. Some of these fans they honestly don't want to hear anything except what's relevant to watching the game, and it's that simple. Now there are other elements of it that are very problematic. Okay, problematic to the average fan in that they start to see issues where they are being told things that they themselves could not say in their own life. Now, I'm not saying that they would not be able to say what the players are saying, but bear with me for a second. If I was to be, staunch anti-abortion activist, and I heard Marc Davis on the radio yesterday. He's a kind of more of a neocon, but he still has some good points on the show. He was filling in for Prager while I was driving. So Marc Davis said, if I'm an anti-abortion activist, I can't go to my job and just talk about it all day. So yeah, that's the way I think. If I was to go around to each cubicle in my job and show pictures of aborted fetuses and tell people you must help and you must end all of this suffering and murder, I'd get fired because regardless of whether there are people in that office that disagree with me or agree with me. It's just harassing and uncomfortable for people. and that brings me to the next point, that you have Greg Popovich, the San Antonio Spurs coach, who I'm the first to admit, one of the greatest coaches in the league history of the NBA, of course, but fantastic guy. He's gonna be in the Hall of Fame. But he goes out yesterday. He makes one of the most ridiculous assertions that it's all based on race. Everything here is race, and we're embarrassed to be Americans, and that America is showing itself to be in its ugliest forms right now. Even during a hurricane season, he's saying that. And he also said something about that white people need to be made to feel uncomfortable in order for this saga, or this conversation, as they like to call it, to really get rolling. Well, if you're trying to make people feel uncomfortable, then you shouldn't be in the business of entertaining people in sports and athletics. You know what's uncomfortable entertainment? Cringe comedy, shock rock. Um, you have a lot of filmmaking is, snuff films, horror films. Not real snuff films. Sorry about that, but wow, that really sucks thinking about that. But what I'm trying to say is, you are there to entertain people of all ages. Some people, if you're not there to make people feel uncomfortable, if you're the coach of a team that is representing an entire city, you have children coming to watch a game. Parents don't want to bring their kids to watch a game in order to feel uncomfortable. It doesn't matter what sport it is, and I don't think it even matters whether these parents are politically active or not. They don't. A good parent, at least, not one of these wackos like the ones that are trying to raise their kids gender neutral, but good parents who want to, at least enjoy their evening with the kids, are not going to want to go to an event and feel uncomfortable due to some sort of anthem protest or whatever. Now, there's plenty of people who would agree with the anthem protest, but ultimately you have a sizable proportion of the fan base, and that's what's important. The importance is growth. The NBA needs growth. The NFL needs growth. If you consistently have the same amount of viewers year after year, then there is no growth. It's the investment isn't there. The advertising isn't there, because advertising is meant to get customers that you haven't had before. Growth. Very simple. You can't go at the same level every year. Otherwise, you can't hire new people. You can't make more money. You can make just enough to get by. Sometimes business is not a subsistence lifestyle. So, for better or for worse, Greg Popovich, in his statement, he showed just how inept he is when in regards to the protests. And again, I'm not talking here about whether the protests are correct or not correct, or that they have a point or don't have a point. I'm saying that the strategy being employed is a failing strategy. It's doomed to somebody like Popovich, who is very obviously he has to deal with strategies in his game planning. Should probably really think about it in terms of strategy. It's a failure. It's a non-starter, because people are not going to enjoy coming to an event and just not getting out of it what they want, whether it's the victory or as opposed to a defeat. That you can't always help, but when you add political elements to it and you still get a defeat, people get pissed off. They say, why are these idiots focusing only on this? And that kind of brings me to my next point. That a fair amount of these people that are kneeling don't necessarily care at all. The ones that do, they don't have to kneel anymore to get the attention to the cause that they need. Listen, there are about 4 or 5 players. There might be more. I could be wrong, but there are about 4 or 5 players that have a good handle on the whole issue of why these players are protesting. A lot of the other ones are honestly on autopilot, even not just in regards to this, about everything else. And these people, they have this impression that, yeah, this is the new, the new hand warmer that we wear, or the new headband. That's yeah, I can wear that headband. They think the same thing about kneeling, or maybe they take a little hesitation before it, but ultimately they're convinced. Yeah, that's what we're doing. I guess we're kneeling, right? Right. I mean, I see everybody else here kneeling. I think a lot of the people that are kneeling are doing it because of that. Some of them, beyond the few that I'm saying are Um, they're very well versed in it. There's a few that are kind of, they're committed and they want to know more, as always. And I'm not trying to tell you that these people are complete scum. Some of them are. Odell Beckham, for example, with his idiotic behavior on Sunday. If you're such a serious protester, then why are you pissing on the field, basically, or mimicking it? It doesn't make any sense. Either you be a full clown or you go serious. There's no way to reconcile the two. And then the other thing about that is, like I said, Richard Sherman, Anquan Bolden, even Kaepernick himself, they don't even need the kneeling to bring attention anymore. The kneeling in and of itself does absolutely nothing, because people can kneel every time. It's the same time. It's the same thing as that Kony 2012 campaign. If you remember it from 2012, this guy was telling people to tweet out the hashtag Kony surrender in order to get a warlord in Central Africa to turn himself in. Well, guess what? In Central Africa, Twitter doesn't really govern the pattern of war and the military advances. So, nothing came of that. But for a few days, he was world famous. Nobody remembers him anymore, and a number of these people don't realize that this is basically career suicide for some of them. I've been watching these videos of people burning their jerseys, and I'm not willing to do it because I think this is not as big of an issue as people are making it. Yeah, you can come to work and make a fool out of yourself. That's the way the NBA is. It's not an issue because ultimately, whether you believe in the justness of their cause or not, it is going to sink the NFL so fast in terms of ad revenue, in terms of finding people who will actually appear at the games. I never thought I'd say this, but I mean, beyond the city I live in, there's going to be a lot of stadiums where you're just going to see empty seats, and the terraces are going to be completely void. There's just going to be cameramen and ushers and beer sellers, and that's about it. That's the way that this protest is propelling it. And I'll give you one more metaphor, okay? Let's say that I was one of these players, and I was to say, yeah, I'm just going to sew a marijuana leaf onto my uniform because I'm in favor of drug legalization. I feel very strong and passionate about that. The NFL would kick me out so fast, I'd probably land in a marijuana field. I mean, that's how fast and drastic their action would be, because they don't want any message that is incompatible with their wholesome image for their crowd. I'm not saying it's an actual wholesome image, but they won't allow somebody to promote a cause that is actually that they've actually thought out very well. But a stunt like this, based on identity politics, oh yeah, we're just too big of a pussies. We're just huge pussies, and we're not going to do anything about it. Let me tell you something about the NFL and free speech. For anybody thinking, oh, the NFL and Colin Kaepernick, they're just standing up for free speech. In 2011, I believe, Hank Williams Jr., and I was going to bring it up a couple of days ago, but I forgot about it. Hank Williams Jr., he gets interviewed on one of the Fox late night programs, and they're like, yeah, well, what do you think about this photo of John Boehner golfing with Barack Obama? He's like, I think this sucks. I think it's like Hitler meeting with Netanyahu. And they took it to mean that he thought that Obama was Hitler and that he was being a racist. Well, he clarified on TV, and he wasn't even apologizing. He said, I didn't mean it. It was an analogy. An analogy, like these things shouldn't go together. It doesn't make any sense. It's an analogy. I don't even care. I mean, what am I trying? I'm not being racist when I say that It's like Hitler meeting Netanyahu. It's like two things that shouldn't go together. But you see them in front of your face, and it doesn't make any sense. They fired Hank Williams so fast that he probably thought it was Monday night the next 7 nights, because this was a network that they were willing to get rid of an institution on their Monday night program. A guy who I remember every week. It's not that great of a song, but it's part of the Monday Night Football mystique, the Monday Night Party. They just axed him for a comment that was, first of all, it was off the football field, completely separate from it. It wasn't even talking about the NFL. And they said, we can't have people like that tarring the reputation of our league. So he was gone. And I think maybe a year or two ago, they actually had to bring him back because, Monday night was struggling because it is the shittiest. It's the shittiest night in football. No, there's typically not that many good teams playing on Monday night. This week it happened to be Dallas and Arizona, 2 good teams. But yeah, there were other seasons. I think it was 2 seasons ago was just unbelievably boring. It was like San Diego versus Jacksonville or something. It was useless. So yeah, that's the way the NFL relates to free speech, and you can pussyfoot about it all you want, but ultimately, sure, these players can they can protest and they can state their opinions, but that doesn't mean people are not going to not come to games just because they oppose the protest. They're also going to not come to the games because they're not as interesting. There's so much. I mean, there's so many pauses. I was watching the game on Monday. So many pauses. I was watching with somebody from overseas, and she was like, "No, yeah, I mean, it's like, and you have to explain every little thing, and then you start to realize, wow, there is so much dead air going on here. So many things that are going on with no action that." To the casual observer, it doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, that's about it. I think that people are. I heard today that the Steelers are kind of begging people to come back and watch their games because they're now being called the Pittsburgh Kneelers, and nobody cares anymore about there's people who grew up, in coal country in Pennsylvania or in the surrounding areas, McKeesport and all that, and I hate the Steelers, but they grew up for decades as Steelers fans with the stupid Mean Joe Green jersey and all that. Those people, because of this protest, they've started the biggest revolt that there's ever been. And it's not like all the fans in Pittsburgh have to not watch the Steelers for this to be a disaster. It only has to be, in my opinion, it would only have to be 5 to 10% that would, abandon the team altogether, and it would be considered a disaster. Yeah, when people stop watching and when people start to lose interest, the future of the sport goes into jeopardy. Eventually you could talk about a labor strike because there's already rumblings about a labor stoppage in the NFL next year. About what? I'm not entirely sure. I think that at this point, they have their heads so far up their asses, possibly more than Greg Popovich's, that it's impossible to retrieve them. So have a great night. Bold like a leopard. American Gladio. This is the September 28th edition, and I hope you enjoy tomorrow. It's Thursday, and I don't think that I'm going to be tuning in for this Bears-Packers game. It just, fuck it. I mean, this is going to be more of this garbage.